this guy on the Nine Marks website. Are you a Calvinist? Asked the interim pastor who was guiding the pastoral search committee. Huh. Somebody said Calvinism is biblical. Calvinism is as biblical as the Antichrist is biblical, okay? They asked this guy, are you a Calvinist? Asked the interim pastor who was guiding the pastoral search committee considering me. If you're a Calvinist, then this candidacy is over now. And listen to what they do here. How would you answer that question? As a 7-point Calvinist, he knows he's a Calvinist. So instead of just saying yes, okay? Instead of just saying, yes, I'm a Calvinist, and ending it, no. He's willing to deceive these people to get them to pay him, even though he is something that they stated overtly that they do not want. So he said, what do you mean by Calvinist? He replied. And they replied, by Calvinist, I mean you only share the gospel with the elect, and you don't need to pray for people's salvation because it's already determined. And then he goes, well, based on that definition, I replied, no, I'm not a Calvinist. 4 months later, I was installed as their pastor. Now look, this is just one case in point. One case in point. But you have to understand, these guys have a whole bag of tricks up their sleeve. A whole bag of tricks. The first thing I want to point out is that he replied with a question. What do you mean by Calvinist? And that's where I would stop the train. I would say, no, stop. You're the candidate here. You tell me what you think a Calvinist is, and then you tell me whether or not you are one. Try that. But here's the problem. And I've been texting with people. I've got people texting and emailing me all the time about Stealth Calvinist Takeover, and it seems to have stepped up in volume and frequency lately, maybe because of the First Baptist Church on Bayshore under James Ross, that kind of stuff. It's getting more attention, as it should, and that's good. I'm not telling people to hold back. Okay? We need to expose this kind of stuff. But I can give questions all day long about what to ask these clowns, okay? But their deception is so... The problem is the lay people at the Southern Baptist Church cannot decipher the answer that they are hearing, okay? So if I were to ask a question to a potential pastor or candidate who is a suspected Calvinist, I would be there to interpret the answer and to hear between the lines and what's not being said. And they wouldn't see me coming because they know most Southern Baptist lay people are not trained enough in these kinds of things to be able to understand the dog whistle answers that they give. You say, what do you mean by dog whistle? They speak in terms that sound like what anybody else would agree with, but other Calvinists know that they are speaking their language. They'll say, well, I believe that God is sovereign and in control, and I don't believe by works salvation at all. Salvation is completely by grace. Now, we would all agree with that, but they mean different things by all those phrases. When they say salvation isn't by works, they mean it's not by faith. When they say God is sovereign, they mean hard determinism. When they say salvation is only by grace, what they mean is that regeneration precedes faith. Other Calvinists are interpreting that. They know what's being said, but the lay people don't know how to read that dog whistle language. And that's how they talk. They are slick. They are sly. Okay? And I can't even give you a list of how slick and sly they are because they're constantly coming up with new ways to repackage their deception. So you kind of have to exercise discernment live as this is going. Notice he asked by Calvinist, he said, what do you mean by Calvinist? Now, if you have a pastoral candidate, there's something you need to understand. The person asking the questions is the person in control of the conversation. So if they answer a question with a question, they're going to try, their cover story is going to be like, oh, I'm being like Jesus because he answered a question with a question. But what they're really doing is they're engaging in sophistry, okay? They're trying to use a question to redirect for them to get control of the conversation. Now they're in charge, and now they are going to use, like this here, they use this guy's ignorance against him to slip through the cracks on a technicality. And with a guy that is this sly and deceptive, okay? He for sure has, it didn't take him long. It's 2019. I don't know when he was installed as pastor, but that's when the article came out. For sure, he had no trouble converting the whole congregation. AK-47 for God says right there he just misrepresented Calvinists as hard determinists. No. There are a spectrum of Calvinists ranging from compatibilists to hard determinists, but the problem is the compatibilists are hard determinists. All a compatibilist is a hard determinist who wants to sugarcoat their hard determinism in the language of free will for non-Calvinist people. That's really all they are, okay? It's what we call an inconsistent Calvinist, right? It is Calvinists who don't understand Calvinism. Like we were talking about yesterday in our Rule Omega video, a stage 3 person they cannot comprehend understanding something without also being persuaded of it. For them to be persuaded of it, to understand it, is to be persuaded of it. And they can't understand somebody who's multi-perspectival, who understands a certain thought paradigm, but does not buy into it or identify with it or is not attached to it. That's how they do things, and that's how they think other people do things. So it's something that they can't get.